Hey guys, it's just Corey here. Just wanted to jump in before today's episode to let you know that unfortunately we lost our main audio for this one, but Cam is so knowledgeable in what he spoke about. We still wanted to get this episode out to you guys, so we hope that you can look past it and the better audio will be back for next week. Cheers guys and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Watts Wellness Podcast. My name is Corey Watts.
And my name is Sanchia Watts.
Based in Perth, Western Australia, both of us have been on our own self-development journeys for many years now, which has led to this moment.
The intention behind the Watts Wellness Podcast is to help you meet yourself deeply as you navigate your own human experience.
Become present in this moment.
Take a deep belly breath.
And be open to receiving this week's episode. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Watts Wellness Podcast. Today I'm joined by Cam Watkins, a sports physio and director of Darch Physio and also the owner of CntreSpace. Cam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, an honour to have you in as well. I guess I've seen a lot of your stuff online. I think it really aligns to what the Watts Wellness Podcast is about and what we sort of talk about. I mean, wellness is on such a spectrum, and I think what you sort of dive into with your work really aligns with what we've spoken a little bit about on the show so far. So
beautiful. Thank you. And I'm loving seeing what you guys are up to. And the podcast is really cool. I can see it's going to grow. So I'm just really happy to be here. Good chat.
Unreal, mate, for sure. So I wanted to start off the episode, like always, with the strength and challenge. So can you hear that from you? It's always good to sort of get to know about what your week's been like and a bit of relatability. So did you want to start us off with maybe the strength and then follow up with the challenge?
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, as a strength, I'm feeling really good at the moment. I'm sort of building into this new year. Last year was a big year and a rough year. And the big one, probably I lost my dad second part of last year. And that was a real kind of tearing down of a few layers and going through some pretty serious grief for the first time. And I feel like a lot of rebuilding into the new year and now I'm just feeling great. And I don't know, just a good energy at the moment. I think I was really gentle with myself the second part of last year and so training kind of pulled back, and training's always been such a staple for me. A little bit of that Goggins attitude has always been, just push through, whereas I really allow myself to kind of just soften and chill and be gentle to myself. And I feel like I'm stepping into a zone now where I can really push it. And I'm loving that. And just feeling like I'm getting that vitality back. Feel like I've got my mojo back. So that the strength is there. We're building. It's nice.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. Well, first of all, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you,
man.
First and
foremost. But I guess that sort of grief, did you want to go into that a little bit with how you sort of overcame that? I mean, that's probably a massive thing, and it's not something, I don't know, do you think that you do overcome grief, or is it something that you sort of learn to integrate and be able to just move through life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's just like so many layers to it, it was unexpected, and it was such a shock and really sad, but at the same time, Dad had a beautiful life, and I had a beautiful relationship with Dad, as we all did in our family, a real tight little unit. So that, there was no regrets, and I'm not holding on to anything there. It's just the sadness of him not being around. He was such a beautiful friend and support. So it's just something you keep moving through. But the firsts is such a big thing if you ever talk to anyone that's lost someone close. So Christmas was bittersweet, and it, beautiful and fun, but then with this somber undertone. So just when you think you're coming into a good zone, all of a sudden you have this new wave of sadness moving through something that should be such a beautiful time. But it was such a beautiful time. And again, when something cool pops up that I would normally, message or call Dad or catch up and chat with Dad about, you get that little wave of grief and you just sit with it and move through it. So I think in time, you have more to work with, and perhaps the grief softens a bit. But yeah, it'll come in a big wave, and if you lean into it and just cry it all out and let that come. It's so therapeutic just to allow all of that. So I think it's probably with us forever. But over time it just kind of gently thins out a little bit. But it's a process, and it's a beautiful process as well. We're all going to go through it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be able to recognise the strength, I think is such a massive thing for itself. So
yeah. So in terms of like specific challenge this week, not so much. I'm feeling great, and mainly feeling the strength and just the vitality in that. So yeah, I feel really good.
So yeah, a strength and challenge for me, I think this week. I always like to give mine as well.
Yeah, awesome.
It's actually going to align pretty well actually with why you're here. But I think probably I'll start with a challenge that we're back into football for the first session of the pre-season, which is always a bit of a stressful time for me, which is an interesting one. So we had the first session, as I mentioned, last night, and I had a lot of anxiety and stuff come up around it, and just around performance, and just, I don't know, it was a bit like stress going into it, and I found like running wise, like I just felt tired and a little bit in myself. And then afterwards, like pretty big headaches and stuff like that as well. So it kind of leads well into a bit of what I've seen around. But I did want to ask you about that off the bat a little bit, like what's sort of that physiological response to stress, and how can that impact me as an athlete when that's sort of coming on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive one, and it's the biggest kind of impact on us. I think more than anything else. When you're present and you're calm and you're in flow, things just are easy, right? There's a kind of lightness to you. The breathing is natural and easy. Whereas when you're stressed, we kick into that, that stress response, that sympathetic response of the nervous system, which is, the breath gets a bit tighter and we breathe into our upper chest, often in, mouth breathing in and out, as I'm sure you guys know heaps about. But that just literally like a dial, it just dials you up towards that tension, that stress response. So nothing in the body is sort of flowing easily in that point. As you know, if we're more in that stress response, even the digestion is affected. The muscles are preferentially working, whereas just even your digestive system is kind of constricted and things like that. So, and that moves into your sleep. So, you probably would have found that your sleep was a bit less settled, and you're a little bit more irritable, a little bit more like wound up. Your digestion's not working as well. So then you're not even necessarily absorbing all of the beautiful nutrients, and things might not be moving as fluently there. So there's no way that you're going to be functioning at your best if there's this underlying stress throughout the week. So yeah, it's a big thing. Whereas if you're more in that calm state, if you're feeling really comfortable with everything in your life, and you're more in that parasympathetic, you're probably calm and naturally breathing. Maybe nasal belly breathing. The breathing rate is slower and easier, so it's just more easeful. Everything feels more comfortable, and then you're able to kind of feel rested and recovered. That parasympathetic state is obviously more conducive to rest and recovery and healing. So the body's naturally going to feel better, if you're in that stressed state, as the, evolutionary mechanism of stress, you're going to feel more like sensitive. Every little pain, so our pain threshold comes down, so little niggles become amplified, and any discomforts become amplified in that stress response, and that's part of the mechanism of it. It's pretty interesting, and it's with us for a reason. If we think back to how we evolved in the first place, let's go back hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. We would be stressed for a reason. Either we were needing food or shelter, or there was an actual threat to our survival. It would make sense to be really wired and to feel every little sensation right to the absolute sensitivity. It would make sense to be able to hear a pin drop over there because you're needing to survive. So that might be the difference between surviving and not surviving. Whereas, in our day-to-day lives, that doesn't really serve us that much. We don't need to be moving throughout our days with this kind of edginess and this like real wired upness. So you wouldn't have been recovered as well, and then you would have been going into training already feeling like knackered. You're already feeling tired and fatigued, and like you said, headachy and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is pretty full on, which I think is probably the strength that I was able to sort of come out of that training session and reflect on that and be able to go, okay, like I was feeling all this, and last night I really took the time to just be a bit mindful with myself and actually try and calm that down and get that recovery in. But
Beautiful.
yeah, it's such an interesting point that you make, and it is something that I want to dive into a little bit further and chat about more. But I want to sort of start today on your journey. I mean, you spoke just then, you are really knowledgeable about that stuff, but I'm wondering, has that always been the case, or how you came into where you are now, obviously a sports physio and the owner of CntreSpace as well, and working with men's development and all these different areas? Like, how did that come to be for you?
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and you know, I think if we go back, you know, I've always had probably an open mind to maybe spirituality and things like that. And my older brother Stuart Watkins, you know, he's a beautiful yoga teacher, and he kind of paved the way. And you know, for a spiritual practice, an open-minded way of thinking, and bringing yoga kind of into his life and then into our life. So, you know, he's been a beautiful mentor. And so I was always practicing with his yoga and getting all the beautiful pearls of wisdom from yoga in terms of mindfulness and just finding relative peace within, you know, no matter what's going on, even, you know, within relative chaos around us. How can we learn to just be present and accept what's happening and move through gently and calmly with that peace. So I was studying physio and learning all about the body, and you know, I was always certainly, you know, obsessed with health and wellness and sport. You know, I grew up loving footy and surfing and everything there. So I was kind of cruising through physio, or, you know, not cruising, I would say. It was pretty tough old slog, with lots of stress along the way as well. And again, to mention, stress isn't always such a bad thing, you know, that I wouldn't have gotten my physio degree without a fair whack of stress throughout that. It kicks you into that superhuman mode when you need it, with that survival mechanism. You know, that's why everyone says they, you know, sometimes some people are productive throughout, but that night before the exam, they just bang it all out and get it done somehow. And then when I became a physio, just working in private practice, working in people with pain and tension and stiffness and the whole gamut of different things, I just found I was always bringing in yoga philosophy, just nuggets of wisdom that I was getting from yoga, and you know, bringing that into the session. So working with people, they might have tension and pain or whatever, and just getting them to observe how they might be breathing. You know, is it in their upper chest? Is it all caught up here? You know, for instance, if you're in that stress response, if you're more upper chest breathing, you know, the shoulders are rising and falling. So you're using what are called these accessory muscles of respiration, the upper traps and levator scap and scalene, to lift that rib cage up and out. And not to mention with the sensitivity that comes with stress and the inflammation. So to be able to, you know, allow someone to connect the dots and go, okay, is there stress in your life, and is that potentially contributing to your current situation? And then they might have a penny drop moment, and just to come back to relaxing the breath and relaxing any tension and nasal belly breathing. You know, that might be the most profound tool that I give them in that first session, is just sitting in the chair and nasal belly breathing. I haven't even, you know, laid a hand on them or anything like that. Just allowing them to understand the body a little bit more, and then just some gentle movements, and often yoga-based movements. You know, everyone can benefit from doing some mindful breathing and some cat-cows and some whatever else. So whether they had neck pain or back pain, and just giving them those gentle tools, and come back in a week and you know, generally they're significantly better just with those simple little tools. Simple, but so effective, and so much of the time overlooked. And so I kind of kept going with that, and I was sort of physioing the state footy teams and the state netball teams, and I was just sort of, you know, I liked elite sport, I liked high performance, I wanted to dive down that path, and then I ended up following the netball path and ended up as the head physio for the West Coast Fever. So I got into that nice high performance role at like a pretty young age, and so I was the travelling physio with them. But it was cool, and what they liked is you know, that I could wear a couple different hats. And like let's say someone who's so affected by stress, how that can then affect your flow and performance on the court or on the field. And definitely shout out to Jodie, who's the performance psychologist there, because she really helps to look after all the girls, and she's looking after so many different athletes in the state. But she also could see the benefit of my views and approaches, and she gave me the power at times and just would say to one of the girls, well, just go have a chat with Cam, because I think that will benefit you. And then we can just dive into these conversations about mindfulness and what happens when we kind of get caught up in the monkey mind and the catastrophizing thoughts and the fears and the doubts and the insecurities. That's all mind stuff, and that's absolutely taking you out of just being in flow and moving with ease, and it's very hard to perform in that state. So then it's like incorporating mindfulness-based practices into everyday life, and then that might help sleep better and recover better. So then they're not, they're recovering better from injuries, and then they're pulling up better, and then hopefully eventually performing better. And it's so effective, and you just can't underestimate how effective some of these, what are relatively simple approaches. As humans, we just need to be told it time and time and time again. And so I've always found it really effective and powerful working with people in that way. And then, I opened up Darch Physio with a best mate of mine, Craig King. We studied together through physio, and then got to a point where we were just keen to have a clinic where we were the bosses, and we did it our way. And straight off the bat, that was about 7 and a bit years ago. And even at the time, the kind of handle on it was a holistic approach to physio. And even at the time, even Craig was a bit like, was that a bit woo-woo or something? 7 years ago, holistic kind of carried with that. Well, now there's a holistic approach to finance and a holistic approach to everything that you do. And if you're not looking at a person, with kind of zooming out and looking at the whole picture, then you're definitely going to be missing some pretty bloody important pieces of the puzzle. So, we've been able to build up Darch Physio really nicely, and that's our baby, and we've got a beautiful team up that way. And then, I was just kind of seeing what would be the next thing, because that's been so successful. And is it another physio clinic? Is it like, just sort of waiting for the right thing and whatever else, just patiently. And then CntreSpace, which is, it's in North Perth there, and Malika did a beautiful job getting that to where it is and building an incredible community there. And then she was selling it, and then it just aligned everything with me. I've been teaching there for the last 3 years. I teach my spinal flow and mobility class there, and I was just in a position to take over the ownership, and I brought in my best mate from growing up, Lee Catania, who's just a legend, and he kind of helps out and does all the things that I might be a bit pushed to do. He helps out with a lot of the back end stuff, and then Stu, my brother, and his wife Jo are part owners there. So we have a good little team just running CntreSpace Studio as well. So it's just, I'm loving it. I feel like it's a beautiful yoga studio. It's always been a little bit outside the box, and there's probably one of the earliest studios doing breath work a lot of the time. There's breath work every single day, and sound healing and all sorts of things there. So it's a beautiful studio, and then there's room to kind of keep seeing how we can add some interesting and powerful healing modalities in there. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, definitely. It's so cool. I mean, such an awesome journey.
It's a big spiel.
Yeah. No, the experience, we're going to have to unpack a little bit of it now.
All right, let's do it.
One of the questions I did want to start off with was, you've obviously worked with like men and women, so like the feminine, the masculine along the way. Yeah. Have you found there were different approaches to kind of the stress management, or the way that you had to sort of, do your practices on those different energy types? Was there people that adopted it better or for worse? And I'm not trying to get you on stuff here by saying anything, but I think it's just interesting maybe to hear a little bit about, was it received more by one of the energy types more, or was it trickier to get through to some of the others? How was that how did they sort of differ, I suppose?
No, that's a really good question. I think I've always naturally, got on well with women. I was really close with my mum and my sister growing up, and Stu was always, more of a softer, masculine, so it hasn't been like full yang throughout our life. It's been a little bit a nicer balance. So it came naturally, I think. Interesting being, absolutely immersed in a female environment where the coaches and the bosses and, generally speaking, they're all female. So absolutely that was the way that it was running. But certainly working with females closely, particularly, in terms of trying to get their bodies to perform day in, day out for years, you have to be certainly very aware and very sensitive to the cyclical changes of things, and that's a whole different thing as, compared to, say, a male athlete, not quite so cyclical in nature. And you have to be aware of those things because it affects everything, and it's going to affect their energy, and they're going to have days where they just feel, like they can't be bothered, or they don't want to be there, or they've had something happen in their personal life, and maybe harder sometimes to compartmentalize because it's really affecting how that athlete is going to show up and perform, and we don't necessarily have to separate the two. And if that athlete is having a rough time, then we actually need to give her some space. And if that training session needs to be modified, there needs to be an element of allowing that. And then at the same time, we're in high performance sport, and some things just need to get done. So it's a little bit more of a push and pull, or a bit more of a dance in terms of that high performance, in terms of, okay, at times we're going to need to just pull back and give some space and be there for support. And at other times, it's the art in going, okay, we're going to need to push on. So, it might be the coach asking me, okay, Cam, is she physically good to go for this session? And I can say, look, physically, there's no flags. I'm not concerned from there, but the energy's off, and she might just not be there. So, she might just need a little bit more time and space, and let's just see how we go. Let's get out there and see how we go. And if it's not going well, then might just need to call it. Whereas, with men, I think there is an element that we're sort of designed to fight. We're designed for battle. Where there is an element of get out there and push through. But even still, like the Goggins and the Jocko Willink and the 4 a.m. every day, get up and just go smash yourself. There's an absolute strength to that in cultivating resilience and building robustness and mental and physical toughness and spiritual strength. But like I said, for me, and even going through like what I did last year, there was just no pushing through that. And I mucked around with it, it was probably 3 weeks after Dad passed away, and I was registered for a CrossFit comp, and I knew I wasn't, physically prepared. I knew mentally I was really fragile, and I'm going, do I just give it a miss? And I definitely could have done that, but I'm like, no, you know what, let's just see what happens. And I was able to ask Dad to help get me through that day, and we got through it. But I tell you what, man, that was like, if I've ever experienced an ego death, just like pushing myself physically to the edge, it was almost like that was the thing that finally broke me. And then I just ended up having months off heavy training, and I almost needed to hit rock bottom to kind of get to that point and go, okay, now I just need to just chill and look after myself. And so it's not as simple as men, you can throw them in and push them, and women, we have to be more sensitive. It's not as simple as that. And like, some females, have a more of a masculine energy, and then some men have more of a feminine energy. So it's not quite as straightforward as, well, the physiology is just so different, so you're going to treat them differently. I think, what I potentially bring to the table in the men's workspace is that understanding and that sensitivity, and also, what Stu and I perhaps bring through the yoga and the mindfulness and the softness, it's really powerful. It's one thing to just push through and break through and sort of hammer yourself and build up this bulletproof sort of system. But I think life is a little bit more dynamic than that, and learning to listen to when it's time to just pull back and rest a little bit more and nourish yourself and fill up the cup, and then go back so much more effectively and so much more powerfully. I mean, everyone can have a breakdown, and everyone can, kind of have a burnout, whether you're a male or a female. So we need to feel into the sensitivities and the energy of where someone is at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned sort of like the Goggins approach to things and that sort of training stuff. Do you think it is beneficial for men to sort of have that influence? I mean, as you mentioned, like the mental strength that you get from instilling those habits and doing that every day, but do you think it creates a bit of an environment of, as you said, the tough exterior, and like you just can't let anything phase you, and issues shouldn't be issues, you still just get out there and get it done? Like, do you think there's a line there between, like, when do you know when you actually do need to take that break? Or
yeah, it's a really good question, because when the kind of Goggins and Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willink movement kind of came through with Joe Rogan and stuff, like I was right in on that, and that approach got me through a pretty tricky time, and then. I had a good one of my best mates, my housemate at the time, and we were training every morning, and just that approach of whether you feel good or you don't feel good, just do it and get that consistency and that discipline. You really galvanize this kind of trust for yourself that no matter what, you're going to, when the going gets tough, you're going to get up for it and get it done. We kind of had this, what would Goggins do approach if you couldn't be bothered some days, and that confidence and that trust that you create and that resilience that you create is such a beautiful and powerful thing. But I do believe that it's not the answer to everything, and I do feel that there's a time to go and there's a time to push, but there's also a time to kind of pull back. It's much more dynamic than that, and you have to be aware of yourself and know the signs of when there's potential burnout and things happening. Just pushing through pain and pushing through feeling like shit all the time perhaps isn't the best thing. And so it's learning about yourself, and when it's time to go, I'm having a day off, and do the things that's going to fill up my cup, sleep a little bit more, jump in the ocean, get some sunshine, and have a bit more of a stretch. That's going to really be restorative, and then you're going to be able to come and attack it even better the next day or the next week or whatever that is. So it's really important understanding that, and again, the yin yang in yoga, it's there for a reason. It can't just be all yang. You need the cooling off period. You need that recovery time, and being very effective with looking after yourself, and learning to soften when it's time to soften. That's high performance too. High performance is not just burying yourself and smashing yourself into the ground. It's almost like recklessly doing so. Go hard, train hard, have discipline and be consistent, but also understand yourself and learn to read the signs of when it's time to pull back and look after yourself and fill up the cup a bit. Yeah, it's massive. Do you think that's something that you've brought into Darch Physio as well? That's sort of looking at like the whole body approach. You sort of spoke about it a little bit before, but when we have things like injuries, like say a hamstring tear or something like that, is that something that you try to do as a practitioner and sort of look at the whole body as one and understand like it's not just, the specific location, there could be a whole bunch of other contributing factors that have led to that? Absolutely, and it's been huge with athletes and now working with the CrossFitters who, those guys will just push through and train through absolutely anything, pain and injury, and once you get that adrenaline pumping and you get some drum and bass pumping and you whatever it is, you can push through some stuff, but like a lucky band, and we start to stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, if we don't put some slack into it and relax it, it's going to snap at some point in time. And so much of it is working with the nervous system. So in terms of this whole person approach, I think the main thing is working with the nervous system, communicating with your own nervous system, and understanding when, okay, it's wound up, and I've been wound up for days or weeks, and in that state, like we kind of touched on before, you're going to be more vulnerable. You know, a short period of stress isn't such a bad thing, you know, and that can help move into flow, because, you know, this acute stressful period, like we know with flow as a philosophy, which is when you're in that flow, you know, we've all been there, when everything is just effortless and you're absolutely peaking, but you're not thinking about anything. You're just doing it, whether it's art or it's sport or it's just life, going about your day, and it's just easy. You know, that's such a beautiful place to be. But really, that's, you know, short periods of heightened awareness and stress in a situation where you're comfortable in, like if you're great at sport, and you're well rested and everything's on, and then you're put into a stressful situation like a grand final, you'll get into this epic state of flow. But if it's something else, if it's something in the background that's just causing this heightened state of stress, and you've got this underlying, you know, overthinking brain, and you've got all this problem solving happening and catastrophizing, what about this, that, and the other, not realizing that you're breathing in a way that would show that you're, you know, more in that sympathetic, you're not recovering as well, you're not sleeping as well, the body is going to be way more vulnerable to an injury. So yeah, when I'm working with someone, it's not long into the conversation that I'm like, look, has there been anything happening in the background that you know, that might be contributing to some stress in your life? Or because, you know, technically speaking, I'll just mention that it's often a high contributing factor to different aches and pains.
Yeah, it's so interesting how, like, the emotional side of things affects our physiological, like, so deeply.
So deep. You can't separate the two, you know, and it's a bit of an art in having that conversation, right? Because I think traditionally, you know, the clinician, if they don't quite say it in the right way, then the client walks away thinking, okay, this person thinks that it's in my head, you know, because they've had an emotion and then that's come out, you know, physically manifested as a sore knee or something. And it's like, that's not at all what anyone is saying. It's that stress simply affects the physiology of the body, and that is then that's creating an environment for the system that's probably more leaning towards inflammation and injury and tension and pain, as opposed to being calm and comfortable and happy. Your body is more in a state of healing. You know, technically speaking, these are the most incredible healing adaptive machines imaginable. It's only if circumstances take the person out of that calm, comfortable place in more of, say, a stress response. And if that's happening for a long period of time, that then the body becomes more vulnerable and more sensitive to potential injury.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, yoga, I guess, I like to talk a little bit about that in relation to that, because I think it's going to flow really well as being sort of that beneficiary to being able to relax and, you know, not stress as much. Like, I'd love to hear sort of your take and how that's helped, like, the athletes and people that you work with, if that's something that you sort of shared with them along the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, again, it comes down to managing the nervous system, because the nervous system, if you imagine this like control center that's constantly evaluating your environment, your external environment and your internal environment, and it's just looking for potential threats. So if you're more wound up to a sympathetic state, a stress response state, your nervous system is on high alert and it's super sensitive to anything that could be a potential threat. So if you then couple that with high training loads, like heaps of sprints or heaps of heavy lifting, and the nervous system starts to perceive some tension building up and it's not liking what it's feeling, it's going to do what it needs to do to protect you in the big picture, and that might come with tightness and stiffness and pain. So, you know, one thing I like to say, and I think it's a nice saying, is listen when the body whispers at you before it starts throwing bricks at you. You know, it's like there might be these gentle little signs and messages that, okay, if you can observe it here, okay, do I feel tired, drained, tight, stiff? You know, you're basically asking for a potential injury if you keep pushing through that. And so the ability to kind of listen and go, you know what, I might actually need a lighter training session and go home and have a sauna and a good stretch tonight and make sure I get a good night's sleep. You're going to pull up so much better the next day than in that occasion having that Goggins approach and just pushing through and then unfortunately pinging your hamstring in footy training or something like that.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, so I think in general, like, we've gotten better at monitoring everything, like, you know, with these Whoops and Garmins and the ability to track all of those things with HRV and sleep quality and all of that. I think in general, we're better at monitoring these beautiful systems of ours. But you also need to learn to listen to your own system in terms of, you know, how am I doing? How's my mood? How was my sleep last night? How's my energy? How just generally am I feeling? If you're feeling great, chances are your chance of injury are very low, you know?
Yeah, that sort of trust in self. Is that important to have with your clients and stuff as well then? Like that real connection with them to be able to, you know, back in what they're saying as well? Because I feel like a lot of the time physios can sometimes get a bit caught up with like their own practices and feeling like they have the solution, but often it's actually the person with the injury that can actually articulate to them like what is going on.
Always, yeah. Like no one knows their body better than that person, right? And everyone is so complex and individual, right? So it's there's not a one size fits all approach to any of it. So, you know, certainly with my practice, it's when I first meet someone, it's sitting down like this, nice and calmly and comfortably before jumping into anything, even before how they're moving and what's tight and what's stiff. It's like, how are you going? You know, how are you feeling about footy? How are you travelling? Because you might come in with, say, a tight hamstring, but that's also on the back of a heap of anxiety around, shit, I really need to perform this pre-season and this year, and this means the world to me. So it's your performance is coming with this heaviness and this pressure that you're putting on yourself, and that's coming with this low-grade stress response, and we know that that's going to affect, you know, your performance.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the industry at the moment, like, is it where you would like it to be at the moment? Or if you could change something about it, like what would those changes be? Do you think we could be doing stuff a lot better in this sort of sports physio industry and even adding some holisticness in?
Yeah, 100%. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, and I think you can gather from the way I'm talking, this bit is the main bit.
Yeah.
It's the main bit, because a physio, you know, might be really good with their hands or really good at making diagnoses, right? But if they're missing the whole chunk of how are you going and how do we think you're managing the stress of aiming to perform at a really high level, you know, at this time, then we're missing the main bit. You know, I might be really good at diagnosing a hamstring strain and I might be really good at rehabilitation. But what if you walk away feeling more stressed than you went in there because all I did was talk about, you know, oh God, it's, you know, I've got to, you know, yada, 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 in terms of how severe or not severe this issue might be. I think I'll be much more effective if you walk out feeling nice and calm because we've chatted about the effect of stress and you've got some tools to calm the nervous system down. You go home, have a beautiful sleep and wake up and do your rehab and feel quite good about it. So, yeah, there's definitely room to improve generally in this area. You know, at uni, I think we're starting to now be taught that we're certainly being taught that the psychosocial aspects are a contributing factor in terms of someone's, you know, environmental, emotional situation, and that might be affecting their pain presentation or whatever. But then I don't think necessarily the tools to what to do with that are quite there. And it's only because of my experiences and diving into yoga and spirituality myself that I've got all these tools to kind of draw from. But in terms of, going forward, I think, for me, there's perhaps something exciting on the horizon. I think I might look at doing like a mentorship or something like that, just for young physios or old physios or whoever, And it isn't even necessarily going to be isolated to physios. It might be chiros, osteos, whoever, anyone working with people that is interested. I think it's really important to kind of dive into deeper and for clinicians and for people just to have a better understanding of this stuff.
Yeah, I think it'd be such a good shift to be able to move into that because, you know, even things like functional medicine and stuff, I believe like it's been coming a lot
so
to
good
light lately.
Yeah.
And looking at treating people, you know, not the acute injury, but actually like what's going on around them or the health battle, whatever it is. And I think your practice like goes along the lines of that, which is awesome to see. And it's one of the differences and one of the reasons why we wanted to have a chat to you on the podcast, because it is that difference to sort of the mainstream physios that you see so often. And yeah, such an important one as well.
For sure, man. It's huge. It's huge. And if nothing else, you know, even if the physio themselves isn't that way inclined, you know, I'd hope they're able to read the room and see that, okay, stress is a factor for that person, and that, you know, at least ask the question. And just say, you know, there's so many beautiful practices out there now, you know, breathwork and yoga and all these different, you know, even the ice bath, sauna kind of movement that everyone's into at the moment for good reason.
Yeah.
Just the self-care piece is so significant.
Yeah, huge. I mean, something out there for any athletes or anyone that's like struggling with that at the moment, what would be sort of your one piece of advice? I know it's hard to nut it down, but your main bit of advice to getting on top of that for the time being, or at least alleviating it somewhat so they can perform or sleep at their best, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, learning to calm the nervous system is the ultimate tool. You know, we know that nasal belly breathing is more likely to put you into a parasympathetic state if we focus more on the exhalation as opposed to the inhalation. So, you know, that physiological sigh where you kind of and do that again and again and again. You know, there's the in, out, in through the nose and then out. And just slowly drawing out those exhalations, increasing the gaps between the inhalation and the exhalation. You just start to slow everything down. And if you do that mindfully, you know, if you're lying in bed and your mind's going 100 miles an hour because you're concerned about, you know, what might be happening the next day, just come back to the breath. As you lie there in your bed, maybe pop your hands on your belly, breathe in through the nose into your belly, and just sighing it out and just slowing everything down. And again, in through the nose, sigh it out. And if you just slow everything down, chances are you move into parasympathetic, you'll have a much more relaxing and restorative sleep. And then outside of that, I would just say having probably a bit of a practice around breathing and stretching. You know, if you've just even, you know, I think a lot of people are resistant to things like meditation and breathing practices because, you know, they either don't know enough about it or they don't think they have enough time, you know, to add another thing into their day is tricky. But you know, I'd just like to say anything's better than nothing. So 5 minutes of mindful breathing and gentle stretching is better than nothing. And it's actually so significant, you know, even just a couple of minutes of something calming and mindful, you know, starts to clean the cortisol out of the system and calm the nervous system down towards parasympathetic. So what I would say is, you know, add little chunks of mindful movement and breathing, you know, throughout the day. You know, so it might be, you know, you do a bit of gentle parasympathetic relaxing breathing before sleep. And maybe you do a little bit when you wake up and you get some of that morning sun and have a little bit of a stretch. It might be 5 minutes. But it also, if you're feeling wound up before footy training, you know, on the way there, give yourself 5 minutes to stop into the park and get some sun and have a little sit and some mindful breathing and a little stretch. You'll feel so much more calm and grounded and present by the time you actually then roll into footy. And you know, that might actually be the difference between pinging a hammy and not. Like, legit, you know, we can't say that, but it could be the case.
Yeah, massively. Stretching and all that sort of side of things, is it the benefit of just being able to relax everything is that internally just going to relax you as well? Is that one of the main reasons, or is there a little bit more to that sort of mobility and stretching that you sort of believe in?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, in terms of why do you feel better even after a 2 minute period of stretching and calm breathing, why do you feel better? And how come you can, you might have better hamstring flexibility after just a 2-minute stretch? That certainly has not changed the length of the tissue. These muscles and tendons are pretty thick structures, and it takes a lot more than that to actually lengthen them. But the effect that it is the calming effect on the nervous system. So by simply, calmly, mindfully breathing and stretching and moving, the nervous system perceives this and goes, okay, there's no threat in my environment. So it takes down that protective guarding, that protective muscle guarding, and just lets the guard down. And then all of a sudden you can reach a bit further and stretch a little bit further, and your body just feels more relaxed and you'll feel more calm. So again, that hasn't been an improvement in the length of the tissues. That's just been relaxing the nervous system. So things feel more, fluid and flowy. But with consistency and putting in more time, and then definitely we can get into prescription. With the mobility stuff, I don't know if you've heard of this system called functional range conditioning.
No, I haven't before. No.
Yeah, it's like evidence-based approach to mobility training with, in terms of how long do you hold it for, adding in, it's basically like strength training to improve mobility. And I sort of followed the system around the States for a bit and got all qualified up in that. And so coming back with that, I think that was a big thing after leaving the fever and then going off on a bit of a journey and learning a lot about that kind of stuff. Probably gave me a couple extra tools in the space, because it's like the yoga side, and then adding in some of the FRC stuff, working with these athletes that, let's say we're working with a CrossFitter who needs to do Olympic weightlifting, and you've got to throw a heavy weight over your head and sit in a deep squat. That's going to require a certain amount of hip, ankle, shoulder mobility, and they might be coming and going, Cam, I really want to snatch, but I can't do a proper squat. So it's going to be a process, and I think that's probably something that makes my approach a little bit more unique. I just feel there's a lot of tools to helping people get a little bit more mobile and strong and learning to trust their bodies in these interesting different positions as well.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, it's so cool to be able to bring all those dynamics together and integrate that into sport, especially because I think it is, as we mentioned, one of the things that is missing. And the work that you're doing is bloody awesome at the moment. One of the questions that I like to wrap up with, I actually didn't tee you up with this before, but it's a bit of a one that we like people to think about, and something interesting. So the question is, what do you need to do before you die so you don't die with any regret?
It's a good one.
Yeah, so good. You can take your time with it and have a bit of a think of what you are.
Look, it's funny that, hey, I've always had a bit of an interesting relationship with this, and I feel pretty calm and happy about the whole thing. Even like towards the end of a year, I almost go close out the year and make sure there's no regrets from the year, even if I've, a relationship isn't where I want it to be. I'll send that message or have that phone call and just make sure I'm happy with where that relationship's at. So we're on the same page, and so I don't have any shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I really try and make sure that I'm not holding on to anything that's getting in the way of me feeling very satisfied with how things are going and how perhaps I've conducted myself during a situation. So I really try and live without regrets. And if there are any, I'll check that out, and I'll try and resolve the issue. So I can sit here now and say there's not a heap that I would do differently, and in the meantime, I just want to, squeeze every bit of juice out of life and make the most of it, and have as much fun and spread as much good stuff around as I can in the meantime. But yeah, I remember even years ago being in South America, and in Bolivia there's this death road, which is called that because a lot of cars fall off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
You know the one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's on Top Gear.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I remember I was there with my girlfriend at the time, and it was piercing down, and we're driving up this death road, and the driver's just ticking along doing his thing, and he's eating his coca leaves because he probably hasn't had any sleep. So the coca leaves is what they make cocaine out of, and it just keeps them going for days, basically. And she was like on edge and having a really difficult time. And I just remember feeling so calm because me being anxious and stressed at that point in time is not helping anything. And if we're going to fall, we're going to fall, and it's like, I just remember, poor thing was so anxious, and I was just trying to be like, being stressed right now isn't going to change anything. If anything, it's going to add to the anxiety in the room, in the bus, and that might create so just being calm and just trusting. But I remember thinking it was reflecting on it afterwards, I was like, shit, I wasn't even like, I was really, I think just accepting of whatever happens and that trust in the flow of all things. And I think that also helped, with the passing of Dad, is that we had a beautiful time together while he was around, and I was just so grateful for that. I would have loved him to live another 10 or 20 or 30 years, but it was his time, and just trusting that. So that would be my only thing with someone. If there was something that they were, that was getting in the way of them feeling peaceful and satisfied with their life at the time, it's like, we'll just sort it out now, and resolve that. And so maybe you can have a bit more, calmness or contentment within yourself around whatever it might be.
Yeah, huge.
If that answers the question.
No, it was a really good answer.
Cool.
Really in depth. No, I loved it. Awesome. And I think a really good advice for people to be able to, look at that year. Like, don't wait until it gets to that point.
Exactly. It feels so much better. Like, if you're not holding on to those little things, we can all have this list of little, I wish this was this. Or I was like, well, just try to sort it out now, so then you're not holding on to those things that are barriers to you just feeling really happy and really calm and at peace now, So just sort those things out now,
Most definitely. Oh, awesome, mate. It's been a really good chat. Like, it's been levels with what we've gone into, and I know that people are going to have some awesome takeaways out of it. If they want to connect with you, where's the best place to get involved and to? Yeah,
good old Instagram is a good option. I'm always sort of posting about upcoming events and stuff on that, and there is heaps of stuff always coming up. Darch Physio, if someone wants to catch up as a one-on-one, that's kind of how I do that there. And I always say that you don't have to be broken to come in. So, what seems to have kind of eventuated is that more and more people are coming in going, look, I'm feeling okay, but, someone said I should come in and chat to you because maybe I could, feel a bit better about the body, and I want to just be thriving that a little bit more. Maybe I'll have something to chat about there. Or CntreSpace Yoga Studio, the spinal flow class is good fun, and I love that. But all the teachers there are great, and all the breathwork practitioners there are great as well. So I think between those two things, be able to find some stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely we'll put in the show notes for everybody so they can find those links. So if you'd like to get involved with Cam, make sure you head over there. But thank you, Corey. Yeah, thank you for coming on. The chat's been awesome. Thank you, bro. Thanks for having us, man. Maybe who knows, down the track, maybe we'll have another chat. And 100%. But keep doing it, man. It's a sweet podcast, and what you guys are doing is awesome, and it's going to grow. I can see that. So just keep pumping it out. Really appreciate it, bro. And all the best for the footy season, man. Just go out there and that's it. Grab the bull by the horns and go for it, man. No, we definitely will. Yeah, appreciate it, Cam. Cheers, bro. This has been the What's Wellness podcast. Thank you for listening and checking in, and we will see you all next week. Catch you later.